Are you ready to take a walk on the wild side? The 1970s were a time of liberation, experimentation, and sexual revolution. From disco music to platform shoes, everything was bold and daring in this decade, including people's sex lives. In this video, we'll explore some of the most bizarre and taboo sexual trends that emerged during the 70s. Get ready for an eye-opening journey into kinky fetishes, freaky behavior, and naughty fantasies that will leave you both shocked and intrigued. The 1970s were a time of exploration and discovery when it came to sexuality. With the sexual revolution in full swing, people were becoming more open-minded and curious about different types of sex. This was also the decade when kinky and taboo sexual practices started to become more mainstream. During the 1970s, there was a shift in attitudes towards sexuality. More people were exploring their own sexuality and trying new things. This was partly due to the sexual revolution, which had started in the previous decade. The sexual revolution made it more acceptable for people to talk about sex and experiment with different types of sex. One of the most notable changes during the 1970s was the increase in popularity of kinky and taboo sexual practices. These were activities that were considered to be outside of the norm, such as BDSM, anal sex, and group sex. People were becoming more open-minded about these activities and willing to try them out. The 1970s were a pivotal decade for sexuality. It was a time when people were exploring new things and becoming more open-minded. Kinky and taboo sexual practices became more mainstream during this decade thanks to the sexual revolution. In the 1970s, there was a sexual revolution happening all across America, and people were exploring their sexuality in new and exciting ways. And while some of these kinky sexual trends might seem tame by today's standards, they were definitely considered taboo back then. One of the most popular kinky sexual trends of the 1970s was group sex. People were curious about exploring their sexuality with multiple partners and often engaged in orgies or swingers parties. Another popular trend was BDSM. People were starting to experiment with bondage, spanking, and other forms of kinky play. While some of these trends have continued to be popular over the years, others have fallen by the wayside. Well, one thing's for sure, the 1970s were a time when people were truly exploring their sexuality and trying new things. One of the most popular freaky trends of the 70s was group sex. Swinging and wife swapping became increasingly popular as couples looked for new ways to spice up their sex lives. Many people also experimented with BDSM, exploring their kinky side through activities such as bondage and spanking. Another popular trend was public sex. With the rise of free love, people began having sex in parks, on beaches, and in other public places. This was often combined with drug use as people looked for new ways to heighten their sexual experiences. All of these trends helped to make the 1970s a truly wild and sexy decade. There was a sexual revolution in the 70s, and with it came a whole host of new and exciting sexual practices. One of the most popular kinks of the time was bestiality and zoophilia. People were fascinated by the idea of having sex with animals, and it was seen as a way to push boundaries and explore new things. Many people saw it as harmless fun, and it became quite popular in certain circles. Of course, there are many risks associated with having sex with animals, including the risk of contracting diseases. There's also the ethical question of whether or not it is right to use an animal for sexual gratification. It can be concluded that sex in America during the 1970s was often strange, varied, and unique, with cultural norms and values differing greatly from what they are today. While laws and restrictions were generally more relaxed than they were in other eras, there were still many strict regulations and societal taboos that made it difficult for individuals to explore their desires openly. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great content.